Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss our most thrilling new videos.
The year 1952 opens in the burning silence of North Africa. Hidden between dry mountains and paths erased by the wind, a secret camp comes to life, far from the eyes of the world. Men prepare themselves in secrecy, driven by a single hope: to break the chains of colonial domination. This camp belongs to the Algerian National Liberation Front. Discipline is strict, movements precise, faces hardened. Every gesture is learned like a sacred ritual, passed down in silence and fear. Among these men, one figure stands apart. He speaks little, he watches, he listens, he remembers. He is neither Algerian nor Moroccan. His gaze comes from farther south, from another land where injustice rules under a different name. This man is a South African militant. He has come to learn the foundations of clandestine armed struggle, not out of love for violence, but because his people suffocate under a brutal system built on racial separation. In his country, the law humiliates, divides, and crushes. Each night, under the star-filled sky, he takes notes. Each day, he carves into his memory the strategies, the sacrifices, and the patience required for liberation. He does not yet know that upon returning home, this knowledge will make him a hunted man. He does not yet know he will be arrested, judged, and imprisoned for 27 long years. He does not yet know he will become one of the most famous political prisoners in human history. At this moment, he is only a shadow in the dark, but history has already fixed its eyes upon him. Long before secret camps and roads of exile, the story begins far from the noise of the world. On the banks of the Mbashe River, in the small village of Mvezo, the land breathes slowly. The hills roll like an ancient song passed down through generations. A child is born into a respected Thembu family. His father, Gadla Henry Mfakanyiswa Mandela, is a notable, a guardian of tradition and advisor to the supreme chief. His mother, Nosekeni Fani Mandela, wraps him in silent tenderness from his first moments. The child receives an ancient name heavy with meaning, Rolichlala. In the Xhosa language, the name refers to one who pulls the branch of a tree, one who disrupts order, one who brings disturbance. A name that speaks not of submission, but of movement and change. Around his cradle, the ancestors seem to watch. The wind moves through the tall grass like a whisper from the past. In this Africa still marked by foreign domination, no one yet knows that this newborn will one day carry the voice of millions of the oppressed. Rolichlala grows surrounded by old stories, symbols, and rituals. Every gesture, every look, every silence shapes his spirit. Without knowing it, he is already inheriting a mission greater than his own life. History has not yet spoken his name, but destiny has already begun to write it. Rolihlahla Mandela's childhood unfolds far from big cities and centers of power. After Mvezo, he grows up in Kunu, a village nestled among the hills of the Transkei region. There, the earth is red and alive, and every path seems to carry the memory of the ancestors. The child grows within a large family, guided by the traditions of the Thembu people. Days begin with the sun and end beneath the stars. Rolihlahla plays with other children, runs barefoot on the red soil, and learns early to herd sheep and calves. But what he loves most are the quiet moments of the evening. Before sleep, he listens to the stories told by his mother. Tales filled with ancient heroes, unseen spirits, and struggles against injustice. These stories shape his imagination and nourish his deep sense of dignity. In this rural world, life is simple, yet never meaningless. Every action teaches patience. Every hardship builds perseverance. Rolihlahla watches, remembers, and understands. He learns that a person's worth does not come from strength, but from respect for others. Without realizing it, the child is forging his character. Far from colonial laws and divided cities, he grows in harmony with community, nature, and ancestral values. These deep roots will later become his greatest strength. Time passes, and the child of the Red Earth crosses a new threshold. At the age of 7, Rolihlahla leaves the familiar circle of the village to enter the colonial school. There, learning takes place in a foreign language imposed by a distant power. The walls are straight, the benches aligned, and order prevails. In this new space, children learn to read and write, but also to conform. The knowledge taught does not come from the ancestors, but from a world that ignores their roots. One day, without explanation, the child receives another name. His Xhosa name disappears from the records. In its place appears an English name, Nelson. This seemingly simple act marks a silent rupture, an attempt to erase part of his identity. Rolihlahla becomes Nelson on paper, but within him the spirit remains free. The child observes, understands, and preserves what the land has given him. The name changes, but the soul resists. Without realizing it, this moment plants a deep lesson. He learns early that injustice can be discreet, almost invisible, yet it leaves lasting scars. And somewhere within him, the certainty is born that identity is not given, it must be protected. As Nelson's childhood slowly unfolds, life confronts him with an early trial. At just 9 years old, his father dies, taken by illness. The loss of Nelson Mandela breaks the balance of the household and leaves a deep void. Death does not only take a man, it redirects a destiny. According to tradition, the child is entrusted to the regent Jongintaba Dalindyebo, leader of the Thembu people. Nelson leaves the familiar world of his mother to enter one shaped by authority, discipline, and duty. Within the royal residence, he discovers another dimension of life. He observes meetings, decisions made for the people, and the heavy responsibilities carried by leaders. In silence, he learns that to govern is to listen as much as to speak. Thanks to this guardianship, Nelson receives an exceptional education for a black child of his time. Books gradually replace pastures, but the values learned in Kunu remain deeply rooted. Without realizing it, the child crosses a decisive threshold. Loss becomes transmission, mourning turns into learning, and the path of a future leader quietly begins to take shape. Under the protection of Regent Jongintaba Dalindyebo, Nelson Mandela now walks the path of knowledge. Education becomes his new territory. Each school crossed opens a door to a wider yet harsher world. An excellent student, he advances quickly. College and high school shape his mind and strengthen his discipline. In a country where the future of black children is tightly restricted, his journey is a rare exception. In 1939, he reaches a summit inaccessible to most of his people. Nelson enters the University of Fort Hare, the only institution in the country open to non-whites. There, he studies law and history, convinced that knowledge is a weapon more powerful than brute force. At Fort Hare, the air is filled with new ideas. Nelson discovers progressive thought and debates about justice, freedom, and equality. He gradually understands that the injustice he sees is not natural, but built by laws and men. It is there that he meets Oliver Tambo. Their encounter marks the beginning of a deep bond, rooted in respect, reflection, and a shared ideal. Together, they realize that knowledge must serve the people. But this awakening disturbs the established order. When Nelson takes part in a student protest against teaching conditions, power reacts. In 1940, he is expelled from the university. The path of knowledge suddenly becomes a path of rupture. This setback does not extinguish his determination. Instead, it reveals that every quest for justice demands a price.
After his expulsion from Fort Hare, Nelson is forced to return to his Thembu family. Regent Jongintaba Dalanyebo believes the time has come for him to follow the path dictated by tradition. A decision is made about his future, without his consent. An arranged marriage is imposed upon him. For Nelson, this prospect represents another form of confinement. He understands that staying means renouncing his inner freedom and deepest aspirations. So, he makes an irreversible choice. He leaves the safety of the royal world and escapes into the unknown. His path leads him to Johannesburg, the great city, a symbol of both promise and disillusion. Upon arrival, reality strikes him harshly. He settles in the Alexandra Township, a place of extreme poverty. Homes are fragile, floors bare, electricity scarce, and public services almost non-existent. The city reveals its harshest face. To survive, Nelson accepts any work he can find. Guard, laborer, anonymous worker among many others. Each day becomes a trial, but also a lesson. He experiences injustice firsthand, lived daily by thousands rendered invisible. Through this hardship, his spirit grows stronger. The escape was not a retreat, but a necessary crossing. The hostile city becomes the place where his political consciousness begins to root. In the heart of Johannesburg, in streets marked by injustice and exhausted bodies, destiny places Nelson Mandela before a key figure. His name is Walter Sisulu. A respected militant and rising political leader, he immediately senses the quiet strength within the young man from afar. Under his influence, Nelson discovers a new world, a world of collective commitment, organization, and political resistance. He understands that the misery he sees is not fate, but the result of a system designed to oppress. In 1943, Nelson officially joins the African National Congress. The ANC becomes for him a space of learning, reflection, and action. There, he acquires militant discipline and the patience required for long struggles. It is also within this circle that he meets Evelyn Massey, a young nurse. They marry the following year and start a family. Yet private life is already shaped by the constant shadow of repression. Walter Sisulu plays a decisive role in Nelson's rise. He helps him secure a position in a law firm, opening the path to another form of struggle, the law. Nelson realizes that the legal system used against his people can also become a tool of defense. In Johannesburg, the struggle takes shape. Nelson Mandela is no longer just a witness to injustice. He becomes a determined actor, ready to devote his life to the liberation of his people. Within the ANC, a new generation grows impatient. Traditional methods based on caution and waiting seem insufficient in the face of the silent violence of racial laws. Nelson Mandela belongs to this youth that refuses stagnation. In 1944, with Oliver Tambo, Walter Sisulu, and other militants, he helps create the ANC Youth League. This movement embodies a new energy, transforming anger into strategy and frustration into collective action. The League advocates civil disobedience, strikes, and boycotts. These methods seek not destruction, but awakening. Their goal is to make injustice visible and force power to see those it tries to ignore. Nelson understands that freedom is not won through patience alone. It demands courage, organization, and sometimes confrontation. Commitment becomes total at the cost of heavy personal sacrifices. As his influence grows, surveillance intensifies. Authorities begin to see him as a threat. But for Nelson, there is no turning back. The struggle is now written into the core of his life. The year 1948 opens amid loss and hardship. For Nelson Mandela, it is tragic on a personal level. His eldest daughter, Makaziwe, dies at only 9 months. Grief strikes deeply, hardening his heart against the fragility of life. But this family tragedy occurs within a broader context.
Politically, the National Party, a racist Afrikaner movement, comes to power, elected solely by whites. Apartheid becomes law, formalizing segregation, fear, and suffering. The laws are cruel and omnipresent. Black people are displaced into miserable townships. Relations between whites and blacks are forbidden. Signs declare beaches off-limits to non-whites. Even dogs are segregated by absurd law. The pass system becomes mandatory. Every movement is monitored. Every step outside one's home or workplace is risky. Transport, public benches, schools, and trains are now color-coded. Separation is total, as if the land itself intends to dictate the destiny of its inhabitants based on skin color. In the face of this upheaval, Nelson Mandela makes a decision that seals his future. The fight against apartheid becomes his life's purpose. His commitment goes beyond personal grief. It is now about the dignity and freedom of an entire people. As apartheid takes hold like an iron law, Nelson Mandela chooses to transform his anger into concrete action. He completes his law studies, determined to use the law as both shield and weapon against injustice. In 1951, together with Oliver Tambo, he opens the first black law firm in South Africa. Courtrooms become his battlefield, defending ANC activists, confronting judges. Each trial is an act of resistance. His political commitment intensifies. He climbs rapidly within the party and in 1952 becomes vice president of the ANC. His name attracts the attention of authorities who accuse him of communism, a false charge, yet one used to threaten and intimidate him. Despite repression, Mandela continues his fight. He organizes civil disobedience campaigns, convinced that the struggle for freedom requires courage and perseverance. Arrests only strengthen his resolve. His personal life becomes a silent sacrifice. His first wife, Evelyn, leaves with the children, exhausted by fear and constant surveillance. Yet Mandela does not give up. The cause takes precedence over everything, and the destiny of the South African people becomes the center of his life. The authorities watch, track, and strike relentlessly. In South Africa, being a black activist becomes a perilous act, and Nelson Mandela experiences it firsthand. He is arrested along with other ANC members accused of conspiring against the state. The trial is long and relentless, spanning several years. Each hearing becomes a silent battle, a confrontation between justice and injustice. Released on bail, Mandela returns home, only to face the fragility of his personal life. Evelyn has left, exhausted by constant fear. Despite these trials, he does not falter. Each arrest, each accusation strengthens his resolve to continue the struggle. The chains of the system cannot break his spirit. In a world where repression is the rule, freedom takes on infinite value. Mandela understands that the struggle requires patience, strategy, and courage, and that the price of freedom is often paid through personal sacrifice. Amidst repression and trials, Nelson Mandela's life meets an unexpected light. At the age of 40, he crosses paths with Winnie Madikizela, a 22-year-old social worker. She shares his commitment and understands the weight of his struggle. Their union becomes a silent pact. Together, they affirm that love can survive under the shadows of oppression and that the people's cause can unite two determined souls. They will have 2 daughters, and Winnie embodies the strength of home at the heart of the fight. For Mandela, this encounter is a confirmation. The struggle for freedom is not only a political act, it is also a moral and human commitment. Every action, every sacrifice is nourished by hope and solidarity. Even in the face of fear and constant surveillance, their bond remains strong. Winnie accompanies Mandela on the path of activism, confronting with him the dangers and challenges imposed by a cruel regime. March 21st, 1960, a day of light and terror will be forever engraved in history. In Sharpeville, thousands of black people peacefully protest against the pass laws, but the police, relentless, open fire on the crowd. Blood stains the red earth. 69 souls are cut down, and over 180 injured lie in the dust, shot in the back as they flee. The cry for freedom clashes with the cruelty of power. This massacre shakes Nelson Mandela. Nonviolence, until then a central principle of the ANC, seems insufficient against such brutal oppression. The struggle must evolve to protect the people and resist effectively. In 1961, a turning point emerges. Mandela creates Umkhonto weSizwe, the armed wing of the ANC, the spear of the nation. Its acts are precise, targeting infrastructure without aiming to harm human life. South Africa becomes an independent republic the same year, breaking definitively from the British Empire. But for Mandela, freedom cannot wait. The shadow of apartheid is too oppressive to be confronted by words alone. As repression intensifies, Mandela understands that the voice of South Africa must cross borders. In 1962, he clandestinely leaves the country, carrying with him the story and hope of his people. Abroad, he tells the struggle of the ANC. Every meeting with international leaders and activists sparks awareness across the world. The truth about apartheid, previously hidden, is revealed to all. Far from his land, Mandela remains faithful to his mission. Every speech, every encounter is a piece of the mosaic of resistance. His name becomes a symbol, his life a legend, and his commitment draws the attention of all who dream of justice. Meanwhile, South Africa lives under the weight of oppression, but the international diffusion of the black people's cause begins to pressure the authorities. The world sees the cruel laws and institutionalized violence. The shadow of the ANC grows, carried by Mandela's words and example. Clandestinity becomes a weapon. It protects those fighting on the ground and inspires those far away who can act for freedom. Mandela becomes a living symbol, a beacon for those who refuse to remain silent.
Prison becomes a world of its own, a land where time seems suspended and pain intertwines with struggle. In 1968, Nelson Mandela learns of his mother's death. Authorities deny him the right to attend the funeral, a cruel and painful act. Then, in 1969, fate strikes again. His son, Thembi, dies in a car accident. Once more, Mandela is not allowed to grieve. Loss piles upon loss, but his spirit remains intact. Each pain strengthens his determination and humanity. Winnie Mandela continues the fight outside. She faces constant surveillance, raids, and repeated imprisonments, yet her courage and dedication to the cause remain unwavering. Inside prison, Mandela transforms suffering into strength. Every day, every trial, every separation becomes a lesson in patience, resilience, and the conviction that freedom is not given, it is conquered. Even behind the walls, the ANC's message survives. Resistance thrives on symbols, hope, and silent solidarity. Freedom is never forgotten, even when it seems unreachable.
Across the world, Nelson Mandela's name becomes a powerful echo. Artists, musicians, and activists unite to denounce apartheid. Miriam Makeba, an icon of the struggle, sings the pain and hope of an entire people. Voices from afar amplify the resistance. Bob Dylan, Ringo Starr, and Lou Reed participate in projects like Sun City, denouncing the South African regime. Every note, every word crosses oceans and touches millions of hearts. Mandela, behind prison walls, becomes a symbol. His courage inspires not only South Africans, but the entire world. Physical chains cannot hold the spirit of freedom he embodies.
International pressure intensifies. The regime understands that political and economic isolation cannot last. The shadow of the ANC, carried by Mandela, grows and becomes impossible to ignore. Thus, the struggle for justice transcends borders. The voice of a man confined in a cell resonates in capitals worldwide, reminding all that dignity and freedom know neither walls nor borders.
The years pass, and the prison walls feel less oppressive. In 1982, Mandela is transferred to a more comfortable prison near Cape Town. Material comfort does not end the struggle, but it symbolizes a shift in the air. The regime begins to sense its grip weakening. International pressure grows, and the authorities realize dialogue is inevitable. Attacks, repression, and social tensions make the country unstable. Mandela refuses any conditional release that would demand abandoning his ideals or the ANC. In 1986, he's moved to Victor Verster, a prison with even better conditions. This improvement is not a gift, it signals the opening for dialogue. The chains remain, yet they become a symbol of imminent transformation. The world watches every gesture and word. In 1988, a massive concert in London for his 70th birthday gathers nearly 600 million viewers. Hope spreads, and global pressure on the South African regime becomes irresistible. Mandela, behind bars, remains steadfast in his convictions. He knows freedom is not a privilege, but a right for an entire people. Every moment in prison becomes a lesson in patience and strategy for a future of peace and justice.
On February 2, 1990, a breath of freedom sweeps across South Africa. Frederick de Klerk legalizes the ANC, and a few days later, Nelson Mandela emerges from prison after 27 years of confinement. At 71, his hair is gray, yet his gaze remains sharp and determined. From the balcony of Cape Town City Hall, he raises his fist, a symbol of peace, dignity, and reconciliation. The South African people watch him with hope and respect. Negotiations begin to build a democratic future. Mandela becomes president of the ANC in 1991, and on June 30, 1991, the fundamental apartheid laws are abolished. History changes its course. In 1993, Nelson Mandela and Frederick de Klerk are jointly awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. This prize is a global symbol, the power of reconciliation, the triumph of justice and dignity over decades of oppression. The world witnesses a man who never yielded to hatred. Mandela's strength lies not in vengeance, but in the ability to transform pain into a message of universal hope. On May 10, 1994, a new sun rises over South Africa. Nelson Mandela becomes the country's first black president. At 75, he embodies hope and reconciliation. His goal is clear: heal the wounds of the past and build a united nation. He coins the expression Rainbow Nation, symbolizing a society where blacks and whites can coexist in harmony. Every action, every decision aims to unite and soothe. The 1995 Rugby World Cup becomes a tool of reconciliation. Mandela supports the Springboks, once a symbol of white oppression, and the national victory becomes a triumph of unity. Mandela's personal life also shines. He marries Graça Machel, widow of the Mozambican president, a late but sincere love, illustrating the continuity of life and hope. In 1999, true to his promise, Mandela leaves the presidency after a single term. Yet his engagement continues: fight against HIV/AIDS, humanitarian foundation, teaching peace and dignity. On December 5, 2013, the world mourns Madiba's passing. His legacy is immense, a universal symbol of peace, courage, and reconciliation. He showed that justice and love can triumph over hatred and division.